This is why you're miserable. You're miserable because you are not strong enough to put up boundaries. You are afraid to put up boundaries. And when you do that, you spend a lot of your time on making other people's lives easier and not yours. For example, you may have a friend that calls you to help you work through their problems, or maybe even a family member that calls you to ask you to help them through their problems. And guess what? You're spending 30, 40 minutes helping them through their problem. And you go and you give them this advice, and then they go and to implement the advice. It may or may not go well, but they have to call and update you. And the next thing you know, you've spent 30 minutes a day, several times a day, that add up to 2 to 3 hours of time, giving your time to someone else. And guess what? You weren't able to go do the shopping that you wanted to do. You weren't able to call the person that you needed to call. You end up putting off the things that you need to do and the things that you want to do. And it becomes frustrating. But you also feel this guilt that if I don't answer the phone, they're not going to be able to solve their problem. This happens in every facet of life. You can apply this to your relationships with your spouse. You can apply this to the relationships you have with your children. You can also apply this to volunteer organizations and where you work. Whenever you're giving a few minutes of time here and a few minutes of time there to people, you're taking away from yourself. Just pay attention. Think about the days where you have a list of things to do and you look at your list at the end of the day and you're like, oh, I haven't finished all this stuff. Now think back through the day and reflect on how many times you were interrupted by someone. If you say, I have a lot of work to do and I haven't got it done because there's too many interruptions, you don't know how to put up boundaries. So that is why you're miserable. Further along in the newsletter, I'm going to give you some tips on how you can start to ease those boundaries up so it's not something that's drastic that you won't be able to handle. It is something that I have struggled with in my life and I have now been able to master it. So get to reading that newsletter to find out how you can slowly put those boundaries up so that you can reclaim your time and reclaim your happiness and get rid of all that misery that you're feeling of not being able to get your work done, yet feeling the need to always be helpful to people. I'll see you next week.